The Peaceful Transition Agreement. Between the people of Rwanda and stakeholders and Rwanda government/RPF regime. As a result of the 1994 civil war and genocide, RPF occupied the political space in the area. The agreement intended to restore the space and enable a peaceful transition to the people's government. Agreement by a National People's Concern, NPC, acting on behalf of the people, opposition groups, and interest groups. Facilitators reliant on the international community/actors initiated today, April 10, 2023. 2. Table of Contents Chapter 1, 6 Overview, 6 Background, 7 One of the following two futures leads Rwanda to peace or violence. 7 Political change is necessary, but why? 20 Chapter 2, 23 Agreement, 23. Definition, 23. Agreement Name, 23 The Purpose, 23 Goal, 23 Objective. 24 Agreement Status, 24 Conflict Nature, 24 Chapter 3, 24. The Parties to the Agreement, 24. The role to be played by each party, 25 The Government of Rwanda, 25 National People's Concern, NPC, 26 The international community, 27 The Transitional Council, 29 Chapter 4, 31 Implementation/Starting Point. 31 Transitional Framework, 31. Approving the Framework, 33. Comprehensive Dialogue, 33 Electing the Transitional Council, 34 Mandate of the Transitional Council, 34 Planning and Coordinating Activities, 35 The Executive Committee, 35 Information Sharing/Dissemination of Results, 35 Creation Approving Transitional Framework, 36 Producing the Policy Guide, 36 Reforming Local Institutions, 36 Implementing Emergency Social Programs, 36 Creation of Transformation Bills, 37 3 Chapter 5, 37 Governance, 37 The Transitional/Interim Government, 37 Power Sharing, 37 Turning Bills into Laws, 37 Prepare Citizens for Elections, 38 Forming Electoral Commission, 38 General Elections, 38 The new democratically elected government, 38 Abolish the mandate of the Transition Council, 38 Chapter 6, 38 Enforcement Mechanism, 38 The security during Reform Process, Mobility/Access, 38 The security institution after the transition, 40 National Council, NACO, 40 International Community, 41 Chapter 7, 41 Start and Duration, 41 Misunderstandings and their Management, 41 Chapter 8, 41 Declaration and Signature, 41 Signatories, 41 4 Rwanda Government Logo National People's Concern Logo. Copyright Rwanda Copyright 2023. In this document, the text, except the Republic of Rwanda Arms and National People's Concern NPC logos, can be reproduced in any format or medium provided it is accurately reproduced and not used in a misleading manner. The material must be acknowledged as Rwanda copyright and the document title specified. Whenever we identify third-party copyright material, you will need to obtain approval from the NPC. Please contact National People's Concern, NPC, the technical team, NPC, address 14 Oxgangs Hill, Edinburgh, EH139JR, UK, or email coalition@gmail.com coalition@gmail.com if you wish to use this material in any other manner. Printed in the United Kingdom by the National People's Concerns technical team. By NPC on behalf of the Rwandan people. 5. Part 1. A description of the cause. An effect of the agreement. 6. Chapter 1. Overview. Rwandans have been ruled with an iron fist by the Rwanda Patriotic Front, RPF, since July 1994, when it seized power following the civil war and genocide in which more than 1 million people perished. Since then, President Paul Kagame and his party have dominated Rwanda's political landscape, closing off space to all legitimate competitors. This has created a political monopoly environment. This denial of political choice and opportunity has forced or misled all Rwandans to accept that no one else has the competence to govern except one person and one party, and this is dogmatized as a way of life. As a result of this, all Rwandans have been deprived of their fundamental rights and all the country's institutions have been undermined, forcing everyone into total submission so that this monopoly can continue unchallenged. However, as we all know, political monopoly causes social-economic stagnation and leads to unwarranted conflicts, some of which attract sympathy from both home and abroad. In his speech on January 9, 2023, President Paul Kagame declared that people over 50 would not witness any change until they died. On the other hand, on December 5, 2022, President Felix Tshisekedi of the Democratic Republic Congo emphasized the need to free Rwanda from Paul Kagame's oppression. Furthermore, the U.S. Secretary of State on March 24 commended Rwanda's decision to release Paul Rusesabagina. He stated that the U.S. reaffirms its commitment to seeking political changes in Rwanda and globally through peaceful means. Weighing on all these factors, we see that Rwanda needs to act with urgency to ensure lasting peace and prosperity are fostered. This agreement, therefore, proposes a win-win strategy to ensure that the President and the RPF regime would open up the closed political space and bend to the will of the people to overcome political entanglement. In addition, his family and officials are assured security against retribution for crimes committed by their regime. NPC assumes the responsibility to propose this peaceful transitional agreement as a kickstart in freeing Rwanda's political space. This would lead to freeing public 7. liberties, including freedom of assembly, speech, media, and the use of God-given talents needed to inspire a public referendum. The international community is called upon to use their power, influence, and resources to facilitate a peaceful transition in Rwanda. The terms set out in this agreement are intended to kickstart the negotiations for a peaceful transition in Rwanda. Other negotiations, cooperation, or partnership outside of this remit shall have a separate agreement if necessary. Background: this agreement reveals Rwanda's two futures, one of which threatens her with destructive conflict, while the other offers prospects for peace, but both depend on which choice we make now. Choice 1 is for President Paul Kagame and his family, which he wishes to continue imposing on Rwandans, or one for the people and their country they wish to have. To choose a peaceful future by 2024, we must choose a future that the people want. A choice between emancipating Rwanda's people or imposing Paul Kagame and RPF power is crucial to the future of Rwanda's peace or violence. One of the following two futures leads Rwanda to peace or violence. Choice 1, in the event Paul Kagame and the RPF remain in power in Rwanda. Choice 2, if Rwandans are emancipated. Decision-making process: as long as Paul Kagame is president, he will continue to silence all dissenters who dare to speak out against his injustice, which will be accompanied by punitive laws and military intelligence and Republican Guard operations, continuing to make Rwanda a model of political violence. Since RPF took power 30 years ago, Rwanda has been occupied by Paul Kagame, and RPF has moved from genocide to terrorism in which every life is. If the people are emancipated, they will seize this opportunity to convene a comprehensive dialogue and bring together their representatives, opposition groups, civil society and NGOs, activists, stakeholders. and interest groups to deliberate on all major issues the people and country have that stem from the past and current political failure and decide on the agreeable future they all want and how to transition from the dark history to a new. 8. Characterized by political assassination, harsh punishments, arbitrary arrests, and imprisonment, kidnapping, torture, forced disappearances, public executions, and various other forms of injustice. Consequently, it creates unemployment, poverty, and hunger through its malfunctioning economic policies, and the regime responds by seizing the financial sector and natural resources, vandalizing and confiscating personal property, and controlling all communication so as to silence its victims. As a result, there would be 13 million Rwandans living in these conditions if Paul Kagame and the RPF continue to rule. Future they have chosen. This process will involve making a policy guide known as the Syllabus for Better Life in Rwanda. This guide will outline major key problems and propose solutions. The policy guide will be confirmed by the signing of an agreement known as Amasezerano Ngoma Bihumbi. This agreement commits to peaceful coexistence, partnership, and cooperation in addressing national problems. As a result, emancipated people will have equal opportunities, creating an effective local council system which will lead to the creation of the National Council, NACO, an institution to be formed to balance government power by deciding national priorities and regulating government service delivery on behalf of the people. Introducing emergency food programs for hungry families at zero or affordable food prices in every cell until communities are empowered to survive on their own. To empower the public, foreign aid will be exchanged for work and education abroad. This would involve asking the donor countries that are engaged in this scheme to transfer the salaries of the employed Rwandans directly to their bank accounts in Rwanda, and after 3 years be returned to Rwanda to use there. 9. Saved money by investing it in various projects. Launching projects that generate lots of jobs and reduce trade restrictions and taxes while increasing money circulation among the people. This will boost sales, purchasing power, and productivity. Launched community dialogues within the council system will enable us to address past and current conflicts and injustices to diffuse concealed tensions. Launch healing services to enable communities to amend their relationships through reparations, restitution, and restoration programs. The emancipation of people will result in the implementation of many solutions which in turn will reduce political and ethnic tensions, renew hope, and establish a new tone of voice for the dissenting voices, thus managing internal and external pressure regarding democracy questions. This calming environment and the renewed sense of striving to improve social and economic conditions will vitalize the private and public sectors. This will result in sustainable peace and security. East Africa. In the event Kagame and RPF remain in power in Rwanda, rocky relations will continue to exist between the country and East African states as well as other countries about Rwanda's extraterritorial. Unlike today, emancipated Rwandans will be able to trade with neighboring communities. This will enable a free flow of trade, leading to increased employment and 10. Assassinations and sabotage. As a result, cooperation among the partner states would be hindered and collective economic, political, and social initiatives would be stifled due to individual egos. People fleeing the Rwandan government's persecution and those involved in importing and exporting goods between these countries will continue to be ineligible to enter these countries. Those caught up in these activities will be mistreated because they are Rwandan. All these things will further exacerbate Rwandan misery under the regime's control. Trade opportunities, not to mention an increase in financial circulation. In addition to strengthening social and economic ties between East African communities, trade will benefit when the persecution in Rwanda ceases, as the free people are not fighting to control or silence each other, rather, they will fight to better themselves and control their future, leading to fewer suspected insurrections within neighboring countries. African continent. Rwanda is among 55 member states of the African Union, making it the second largest contributor to peacekeeping missions on the continent. This is according to the French Institute of International Relations. However, when the regime sends forces to another country, Rwandan refugees are immediately targeted for extraterritorial assassinations. There have been reports of extraterritorial killings, kidnappings, forced returns, and other violence in Mozambique, South Africa, Zimbabwe, Zambia, Angola, Malawi, and Uganda, and there is a good chance that these African countries will, sooner or later, enter into conflict with Rwanda because of violations or threats to their sovereignty by the Kigali regime. An example of where such violations have led. If Rwandans are freed, they would use their skills and voice to foster inclusive development, security, and stability on the African continent. Emancipation, on a conscious scale, through educational, cultural, social, and economic emancipation, the individual will not only take back their power but also rejuvenate the transformational declaration that is integrated into providing real change within their lives in Africa. African Emancipation, 19, October 2022. Therefore, emancipated Rwandans would regain this power and play for their role in contributing to Africa's peace. Emancipated Rwanda would act as Africa's partner in development and survive together, unlike Mr. Kagame's interest in an Africa that. 11. To conflict is South Africa following a strong suspicion that the Rwandan government was behind Colonel Patrick Karegeya's assassination in South Africa on December 31, 2013, and 3 attempts on former Rwandan Chief of Staff General Faustin Kayumba Nyamwasa, both in South Africa, where General Nyamwasa was shot and wounded in Johannesburg in June 2010. Rwanda's undermining of South Africa's security prompted Pretoria to expel 3 Rwandan diplomats and a Burundian diplomat accomplice in March 2014. Kigali responded by kicking out 6 South African diplomats. Since then, the relations between the two countries have remained strained, though they have thawed somewhat. Peter Fabricius, November 8, 2018. All these contribute to the conflict between Rwanda and Uganda, Rwanda and Burundi, Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Rwanda and Tanzania. These are close neighbors of Rwanda and members of the East African Community. This means that if Mr. Kagame remains president of Rwanda, this fractious relationship between Rwanda and other African countries, particularly neighbors, is likely to translate into actual conflict. This could destroy all Rwanda's progress. Protects him and his dictatorship. Emancipation means to be civilized and to be human. Africa's humanity is in support of its continued evolution from a continent of conflicts and misery to a continent of hope. No single individual or system can reduce misery and conflict without the participation of the people. People cannot be equipped when they are hostages of dictatorships. Mr. Kagame's African influence convinces other African leaders to deny a peaceful transfer of power. He also changes constitutions to prevent democratic rule from happening elsewhere. This is because if it happens it exposes other dictators. To make it a continental syndrome, Mr. Kagame preaches that Africa should disassociate with the West to avoid democratic conditions. This is nothing but a temporary self-protection, but with a serious consequence on Rwanda because it aims to destroy Rwanda's future by driving away its main allies and development partners due to his individual egos. The world Rwanda's relationship with other countries have been beneficial to her on many levels. State governments in contemporary civilization are legitimate because of 12. Including financially and technically. U.S. relations with Rwanda have numerous benefits, including trade benefits and other initiatives, financial support of $147 million in bilateral assistance in FY 2021, health sector investment of $1,116 million in the last 3 years, $23 million to combat COVID-19, $500,000. In FY 2021, U.S. peace and security bilateral assistance to Rwanda totaled $500,000. A $74 million humanitarian aid package specifically for Rwanda was provided by the U.S. Department of State on October 18, 2022. It included approximately $2 million for FY 2021, democracy and governance bilateral assistance. Rwanda's diplomacy is poor with many countries, including its key assistance providers. Rwanda's support for the M23 rebellion in eastern Congo and Rusesabagina's kidnapping in Dubai affected Rwanda's relations with the U.S. As a sign of declining relations, the U.S. has proposed a comprehensive review of Rwandan policy, as well as a proposal to halt U.S. security assistance to Rwanda due to concerns regarding its human rights violations. This proposal was made by Senator Robert Menendez, chairman of the United States Senate Foreign Relations Committee, U.S. Department of State, October 18, 2022. Democracy. A government is considered legitimate if elections are held free and fair. If Rwandans are not emancipated, then Rwandan government is not legitimized. This is because legitimacy is earned and a government fulfills all these requirements, but Rwanda has never experienced this. Democracy respects individuals and their right to make their own choices. It tolerates differences and opposing ideas, values all people, and supports them to reach their full potential. Each person has freedom of speech, association, movement, and freedom of belief, treating everyone fairly, in society and in court. These aspirations are desirable for anyone on earth, including dictators, if they are to become ordinary citizens. Therefore, democracy is a way of life. If it is the way of life, the people of Rwanda must own a share of it. Paul Kagame's foreign relations of propagating dictatorship and terrorism around the world are not only sabotaging the interests of our main allies in the world, they are also seeking to destroy our people's lives and our country's relations with the rest of the world communities. 13. The United Nations group of experts on the Democratic Republic of Congo reported solid evidence of Rwandan forces fighting alongside and providing other support to the M23 armed group, the New York Times 2021. Rwanda broke diplomatic relations with France in 2006, although these were restored in 2010, globalsecurity.org, John Pike, -2023. If Paul Kagame remains president, Rwanda's international relations is expected to deteriorate even further because those who have followed Rwanda's diplomacy under the current might have observed that it is characterized by either Kagame's way or conflict, and yet those countries who once labeled him as the darling of the West are not willing to take in more of his violations. The economy. If Paul Kagame remains president, Kagame will continue to be lauded for initiating the economic and social transformation of his country. However, the fruit of this development success is not felt by ordinary Rwandans. Financial Times reports that poverty data must toe Kagame's line to show he has overseen a miracle or built a thriving economy, clamped down on corruption and lifted thousands of people out of poverty, when the poverty rate is expected to rise. FT August 13, 2019. There is extreme, biting poverty, food shortage and emancipated economies rely on freedom and equality principles, which are applied directly or indirectly to firms or individuals who benefit from the directives. This increases their growth, increasing economy prosperity. By removing obstacles imposed on the economy by the ruling regime, Rwanda can flourish economically as everyone will have access to resources, safe environments, and the freedom to plan their own finances. 14. Youth unemployment. If Rwanda's economic decisions continue to be dominated by President Paul Kagame, his family, party royalist and military cliques, it means he is the sole employer who controls the means of production and services, and his employment condition is following the dogma of his party, something which is currently holding Rwandan citizens in abject poverty, deprived supply of goods and services, lack of markets and purchasing power, yet expected to pay high taxes and other dues. Despite being failed by the government, As a result of this unfriendly trade environment characterizing Rwanda's economy, those who trade to survive as well as new entrants would be frustrated and forced into exile. This happened to millions of others, as is fairly stated in this UNHCR quote. UNHCR says, there are 14,000 Rwandans in Uganda, millions of documented and undocumented refugees in Uganda, DR Congo, Kenya, Tanzania, Burundi and Southern Africa. These refugees have declined voluntary repatriation mainly for economic reasons. As economic policies are put in the hands of the people, the economy is tailored to Rwanda's needs. Meta-analysis says, democracy is associated with higher human capital accumulation, lower inflation, lower political instability, and higher economic freedom. Democracy has strong and significant indirect effects that contribute to growth. Mehmet Ali, January 18, 2008. Taxation. If Paul Kagame remains president, the already low tax base of Rwanda, now at its lowest point at approximately 300,000 registered taxpayers, of which only 50,000, or almost 17%, pay taxes, out of 13. If Rwandans are emancipated, they can decide what is most appropriate for them through referendum and consensus by moving to direct democracy. Lors and Willman, 2005. People who exercise their 15 million citizens will shrink even further. Based on this estimate, taxes are 15% to GDP. About 50% of the country's budget is funded as a result. A tax expert, Paul Frobisher Mugambwa, who is the head of tax and fiscal policy at PwC Rwanda, recognizes the tax burden on poor Rwandans in these words: tax rates are probably astronomical looking at the size of our economy. He admits that it has previously proven difficult to expand the local tax base. His observation is supported by MP Theogene Munyangio, who says, high taxes are one of the factors blamed for tax evasion as they overwhelm those supposed to pay them. Referring to the tax on residential buildings, he says it increased to 1% of their market value per year, which implies that this particular tax rose by 10 times. According to him, this increase leads some parents to conceal the possession of residential houses by registering them in the names of their children. In a similar confession, another official admits that implementing the new land tax has failed due to the current turbulent economic situation, further confirming what we already knew, that failed economic policies led to failed tax policies, and the result is high taxes squeezed from the few people who against all odds continue their trade in Rwanda. Nevertheless, these policies do not only hurt rights, always favor low taxes. For example, in Western countries, a clear majority of citizens request more redistribution and progressive taxation, which is an indication that the people favor affordable taxes and meet their tax obligations, and also helps. If tax systems fail to deliver, citizens might be encouraged to launch initiatives to reduce inequalities. Therefore, when the tax is not made a burden or punishment to people, they create activities that increase the tax base, and they boost government revenue through taxing lower taxes but collected from many taxpayers, and in the process, tax paid by many covers the loopholes brought by reduced taxes. Example: the burden of property taxes, which affect all residents, decreases by 10 to 15% under direct democracy. 16. Ordinary people, but also hurt the current regime's focused income. Social Security indirectly confirms social health coverage reaches over 85% of the population, while RSSB's contributory schemes for formal workers account for less than 10% of the population. In other words, this 85% of social health coverage is not a voluntary contribution but an obligation. This is because it is impractical to claim that 85% is paid voluntarily when poverty remains widespread, with 38% of the population living below the poverty line and 16% living in extreme poverty, according to UNICEF Rwanda. If people are not forced to pay these contributions, where did 85% of social health coverage come from? To understand how the government forces every citizen to acquire social health coverage which in most cases does not cover them when they go to the hospital but are required to incur additional under the pretext of a reduced bill, one has to see how people are being treated in another service where people cannot receive government service if they don't produce a proof showing they have acquired social health coverage. Another question one might ask is, if people are required to make these social health contributions and when they visit the hospital, they are asked to contribute what they call half of the original hospital bill, how do people know that what is called half bill is not a full bill? And if they are made to pay the full bill in disguise, where does their original contribution end up? Social Security is as significant to Rwandans as other communities around the world. Some concerned people even wonder how in a very poor community with scarce resources and a high unemployment rate, like Rwanda where 90% of the population is not employed and not included in employer sponsored retirement plans survive. According to Democrats in the U.S., Social Security remains a safety net for seniors and offers peace of mind. Like its U.S. counterpart, UK's social security system is responsible for paying pensions to people who have reached state pension age. It also pays child benefits and statutory sick pay to employees who are absent from work due to illness. UK Employment Income Manual, May 22, 2014. The communities that enjoy these social security rights got here not only because their countries were rich. Instead, people who faced the uncertainties brought on by unemployment, illness, disability, death, and old age acted and transformed these situations. This is what emancipated Rwandans would do given they achieved an environment in which they are free to use similar liberties to debate issues that are significant to them. They can create 17 solutions and push social security policies that transform their social economic sectors. The current regime does not permit this. Social health coverage is forced on them, lacks accountability, and they cannot question or complain. People are forced to pay because the government wants it. If they fail to pay, they will not receive identity cards, passports, or get married. Energy. It has been shown that the energy sector is one of many that has been negatively affected by the bad policies of the Paul Kagame regime as described by the World Factbook, which describes the Rwandan energy crisis as follows: energy shortages, instability in neighboring states, and lack of adequate transportation linkages to other countries continue to handicap private sector growth. CIA, December 22, 2022. According to another report, grid electricity is limited and concentrated around Kigali and 80% of the country relies on firewood. It is reported that the current inadequate and expensive energy supply limits sustainable development. In response to the energy crisis, Rwanda will expand its power grid from 276 megawatts to 556 megawatts in 2024. It will import some additional power from neighboring countries. Given the unfeasibility of imported electricity, can we overlook the conflict between President Paul Kagame? Emancipated people can lobby their elected representatives for their interests and local communities' priorities by using their voices. If Rwandans were emancipated, energy coalitions would be established to increase energy while protecting the environment. In order to achieve stable tariffs based on community rates, community energy frameworks will be developed to generate small amounts of energy in supply for small communities. Through the local energy supply mechanism, community renewable generation schemes will be born and generate energy that is sold directly to local people at a reasonable fee, thereby increasing investment in things like local services and more efficient homes. Drawing the lessons from women's electrification in rural U.S., where rural electricity cooperatives cut costs by 30 to 50% compared to existing large private and public utilities and showed that the poor could pay, we see. 18. And neighboring nations? Will his enemies provide him with energy? Most importantly, will the hardships Rwandans experience cooking and lighting their houses decrease? What can be done to save the environment negatively affected by deforestation? The benefit of involving people in decision-making. It is said that the U.S. used federal funding and provided access to electric productive equipment and domestic appliances desirable to women. This consequently drove the rurale market and loads. That these electric appliances relieved women of their heavy burdens and allowed them to work more efficiently in their homes. According to the Collaborative Research Group on Gender and Energy, CRGGE, this model of women's electrification in the U.S. could help developing countries. Rwandan people must therefore be emancipated in order to learn and utilize these schemes to electrify their areas with clean, cheap, and secure energy, to create new jobs and sustain local economies in these areas. Environmental and regulatory standards. Rwanda currently faces environmental problems due to uncontrolled tree cutting for fuel, overgrazing, land degradation, soil erosion, a decline in soil fertility, soil exhaustion, wetland degradation, loss of biodiversity, poaching, and overgrazing, according to the World Factbook 2022. Another report says the country is prone to significant flooding and landslides, particularly during the rainy seasons. REMA claims that Rwanda's energy crisis is the cause of accelerated deforestation. While another report adds, destructive farming. The European Parliament stated that positive relationship exists between environmental quality and democracy. Rwanda's environment is negatively affected because it lacks accountability and incentives for preventing pollution degradation in policy making. This increases environmental issues. Democracy allows public interest litigation and climate action, whereas non-democratic governments are encouraged to exploit nature for short-term power gains. As a result of a vote in the European Parliament. 19. Practices as the cause of floods and landslides. Rwanda has signed many international environmental agreements, but keeping the current state of economy and energy means not adhering to these international environmental regulations or treaties because they will not apply to the marginalized Rwandans whom poverty forces to cook using firewood and eat by cultivating her small holdings. Favoring a decrease of 60% in climate law by 2030, instead of 55%, environmental protection can be ensured by a majority decision. People need to know why the environment is significant for them and debate how to protect it. They need to avoid being forced to do so under a limited set of options. Rwanda is a party to an environment policy signed in Paris which agreed to hold the global average temperature well below 2°C above pre-industrial levels and to pursue efforts to limit the temperature increase to 1.5°C above pre-industrial levels, Michael Bloss, December 2020. If Rwandans are emancipated, they will have the democracy to collectively initiate and bargain for alternatives in the energy, social and economic sectors. This would result in more options to comply with international environmental agreements. Equality and human rights. If Paul Kagame remains president, Rwanda's human rights and equality will continue to be as described by Freedom House in 2022. A. Political rights and electoral process will continue to experience flawed petitions and referendums such as the 2015 constitutional amendments and any elections. B. Political pluralism and participation, repressing political. According to the UN's Peace, Dignity, and Equality on a Healthy Planet, democracy has these essential elements: respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms, freedom of association, freedom of expression and opinion, access to power and its exercise in accordance with the rule of law, the holding of periodic free and fair elections by universal suffrage and by 20. Opponents and voters using the threat of disappearance, arbitrary arrest and detention, assassination, and banning. C. Functioning of government. The unelected officials will continue to set and implement policies made by the executive branch's security and intelligence services. D. Civil liberties. Freedom of expression and belief will continue to be subject to legal restrictions. E. Associational and organizational rights, limited in practice due to fear of arrest or police violence, disrupting gatherings, and complicated registration process for both domestic and foreign non-governmental organizations, NGOs. F. Rule of law. Rwanda's judiciary lacks independence from the executive. Every government official and member of opposition groups without approval from the president's or prime minister's office cannot leave the country for foreign travel or re-entry. Secret ballot as the expression of the will of the people, a pluralistic system of political parties and organizations, the separation of powers, the independence of the judiciary, transparency and accountability in public administration, free, independent and pluralistic media, meaning that if Rwanda is emancipated, all these denied elements would be reclaimed by the people and in the process prevent violent conflict. Political change is necessary, but why? Changing political structures in Rwanda is crucial to ensuring peace and prosperity, and we propose this transition agreement to persuade the Rwandan government to reaffirm its commitment to democracy, transparency, good governance, and the rule of law by opening the closed political space. 21. The opening of Rwanda's political space will lead to 1. The consideration of a peaceful transition in which the people's wants are heard through referendums and receive priorities over any individual lust. 2. Rwandans will have the opportunity to reclaim their rights to choose whether Rwanda should become a democratic country or remain a one-party state. 3. Engaging with the government in advocacy campaigns and political processes of establishing and monitoring various social and economic initiatives is something which is lacking since RPF seized power in 1994. 4. Express citizens' political preferences without interference or harassment by the current regime. 5. Elected government in which participation is based on citizen terms and objectives which most Rwandans and democratic voices representing their interests believe is the right thing to do. 6. Elected officials with the mandate and power to defend the interests of their voters. In the process, the future of Rwanda be decided by the will of the people. 7. A democratic environment where decisions are made at the discretion of the majority. 8. Removing communities from extreme poverty and being able to reorganize their lives and improve their livelihood, which is now denied to them by the existing political environment. 9. Bringing an end to the political repression and organized crime used by the current regime, which is a source of constant grief and despair in a variety of parts of the country. 22. Part 2. Please sign or comment or suggest additions or changes and return your copy to address 14 Oxgangshill, Edinburgh, EH139JR, UK, email freeensafrwanda@gmail.com freeensafrwanda@gmail.com. Once the agreement is fully signed, all signatories will receive a copy for their record. Agreement Section 23. Agreement Section Chapter 2. Article 1, Agreement 1. Agreement between the Rwanda government and the National People's Concern, NPC, in partnership with the international community. Article 2, Definition 1. An agreement that establishes negotiations to open political space in Rwanda for negotiating a peaceful transition. This will result in various reforms, an inclusive transition/interim government, and finally rise to genuine democracy. 2. Following the opening of political space and institutional reform, an inclusive transitional/interim government proposed by the transitional framework shall immediately be put in place. It will include, among others, representatives of all stakeholders and interest groups as defined in the transitional framework. 3. The established transition/interim government shall prepare the public for general elections near the end of the transition mandate. The reforming process shall be carried out by a transitional council overseen by a transitional committee. It shall be assisted by international actors who represent the international community and Rwanda's bilateral/development partners. Article 3, Agreement Name 1. Peaceful Transition Agreement. Article 4, The Purpose 2. These alternative aims to achieve a free, safe, and prosperous Rwanda ruled by the will of the people. It also prevents arms conflicts based on narrow ideologies that impede social, economic, and political reform. 3. Goal 2.1. The goal is to open Rwanda's political space and create a transition away from decades of accumulated political and social risks such as those resulting from the 24. Genocide and decades of repression that maintain the current dictatorship, as well as those resulting from being denied justice. 4. Objective 4.1. This peaceful transitional agreement opens a political space as a window of opportunity for impartial negotiations on multiple issues facing the people and country. This is done before providing for a peaceful transition for restoring livelihoods and well-being in Rwanda. This will be achieved by removing economic and social barriers that prevent people from self-expression of individual preferences. This agreement aims to create a peaceful transition. This would remove Rwanda from the rough rule of dictatorship to the rule by the will and benefit of the people, commonly referred to as democratic rule. This would be made possible by eliminating all restrictions that bar citizens from engaging in the country's political, social, and economic life. A peaceful transition to democracy will help people prepare for change and ensure long-term peace, security, and economic prosperity in Rwanda. 5. Agreement Status, Proposal/Negotiation Phase 6. Conflict Nature, people's interests are at odds with the current regime's interests. Chapter 3. Article 5, The Parties to the Agreement 1. This agreement involves the following three parties. 1.1. Rwandan government/RPF, represented by President Paul Kagame, or his designated representative. 1.2. National People's Concern, NPC, representing ordinary Rwandans, democratic groups, stakeholders, and interest groups. NPC is represented by Richard R. Kayumba. 1.3. Facilitators, an opportunity has been opened up for the international community, represented by international actors, to play a role in the transition process. 25. 2. The role to be played by each party. 1. The parties to this agreement acknowledge that a closed political space hinders Rwanda's social and economic progress and could lead to future conflict. Therefore, they agreeing to work together in spearheading the opening of political space with this peaceful transitional negotiation. 2. It has been recognized by the parties to this agreement that the opening of a political space that has unconstrained articulation and organization will occur when political authority using the state structures does not impose arbitrary control or inhibit the will of the people. 3. Parties to this agreement agree that pursuing a peaceful transition is the legitimate way in transitioning from one-party rule to the rule by the people. It is the channel for fair distribution of resources and rights desired in the continued transformation process of Rwanda. 4. All parties to this agreement agree to raise the resources needed in executing this transition process. They also agree that the resources received in this regard shall be spent in accordance with the set priorities. 3. The parties to this agreement are 3.1. The Government of Rwanda. 3.1.1. The Government of Rwanda shall not treat NPC as a political adversary but rather as an essential partner in making Rwanda free and safe for all. This will be saving it from becoming at risk due to possible conflict. 3.1.2. The Rwandan government shall open political space to allow the peaceful transition process to be launched uninterrupted. 3.1.3. The Rwandan government must abolish all legal and illegal barriers that prevent the public from freely expressing themselves. 3.1.4. The Rwandan government shall guarantee an environment free from repression and intimidation to enable transition activities to be organized and carried out smoothly. 3.1.5 The Rwandan government guarantees NPC that no Rwandan public including government officials shall face any form of brutality or punishment for engaging in the transition process. 3.1.6 The Rwandan government shall make it easy for NPC to carry out transition activities without experiencing interference, arrests, and torture. 26. This is whether by any of its partners or any other citizen who helps in the transition process. 3.1.7 The Rwandan government shall remove any threat to individuals such as kidnapping, disappearances, killings and imprisonment. This will make it safer for people to participate in transitional meetings and freely express their opinions without fear of reprisal. 3.1.8 The Rwandans shall discontinue the rule of repression by allowing citizens unlimited participation in political, social, and economic life. This will enable them to express their choices, priorities, and put their potentials to work. 3.1.9 The Rwandan government shall remove restrictions on political space that impact citizens' ability to have a say in decisions that affect their daily lives. In addition, the international community's ability to support local social initiatives. March 1, 10, the Rwandan government shall scrap all restricting policies, especially those made to silence critics and voices of dissent, and allow both non-governmental organizations and local civic actors to engage in transition process. March 1, 11, Rwanda's government shall remove the legal and regulation used by government to curtail citizens' political participation. This includes limits on fundamental rights, such as freedom of assembly, association, and speech. 3.2 National People's Concern, NPC, 3.2.1 National People's Concern, NPC, representing all stakeholders and interest groups, negotiated a bargaining agreement with the Rwandan government. This is to open a political space that facilitates negotiations for a peaceful transition. As part of this agreement, the agreement outlines a step-by-step process for a peaceful transition, as well as their roles and the intended aims of this transition. Finally, the agreement invites international actors, states and organizations, to help with negotiations and enforcement. 3.2.2 It is the responsibility of the NPC to produce a preparatory framework to engage all stakeholders, interest groups, as well as the international. 27. Community/actors in the preparation and negotiation stages of the transition. 3.2.3 NPC partners with stakeholders and interest groups in preparing, summoning, and convening a comprehensive dialogue. In this dialogue, a transitional council shall be elected to plan and coordinate transition activities. 3.2.4 NPC shall encourage stakeholders and interest groups to sign an agreement for partnership and peaceful coexistence known as Amasezerano Ingoma Bihumbi. 3.2.5 NPC in partnership with stakeholders and interest groups shall plan, call, convene and direct a comprehensive dialogue in which all national issues shall freely be debated. This shall be done before receiving redress for guiding the transition process. 3.2.6 The assembled stakeholder and interest groups shall design a framework for comprehensive dialogue before bringing together government representatives, the citizens, the opposition groups, civil society, and activists to genuinely deliberate on all key issues and conclude the convention with the signing of a partnership agreement. 3.2.7 The dialogue shall elect 66 incorruptible leadership to constitute the Transitional Council and that will plan and execute the transition mandate as provided in its transitional framework. 3.3 The international community. 3.3.1 Bilateral states shall exert their influence and pressure on the Rwandan government/RPF-led regime to make positive decisions that will shape the peaceful transition. Those pressures must include demanding the opening of political space, negotiating political futures and inclusion, human rights, and social justice. To reinforce compliance, some restrictions on bilateral funding flows and embargoes of different kinds shall be applied. 3.3.2 international organizations shall be mandated to assess Rwandan citizens' urgent needs and offer emergency assistance. 3.3.3 In a coalition with NATO, the international organization shall request support for transitional processes and running the transitional/interim government itself. 28. 3.3.4 To enable smooth transitions that adhere to international commitments to state political evolution, international and regional organizations shall collectively assume the responsibility of guaranteeing peace during the transition period. 3.3.5 A team of 10 representatives, advisors, or envoys will be appointed by the international organizations to coordinate the international community's mandate throughout the transitional process. They will provide technical and financial support to achieve the desired outcome. 3.3.6 International organizations shall be tasked with building capacities, monitoring and enforcing the normative or legal regimes agreed upon during the transitional process. In addition, they shall facilitate knowledge exchange within agreed sectors. 3.3.7 The multilateral and regional development banks such as the World Bank Group, the African Development Bank, and the Inter-American Development Bank, international financial institutions, IFIs, and monetary organizations such as the International Monetary Fund shall provide the transitional/interim government with financial support and professional advisory services on economic, fiscal, and monetary policy issues. 3.3.8 Organizations at the regional and sub-regional levels shall be tasked with addressing regional political, security, and economic issues arising from previous regimes to facilitate a smooth transition. 3.3.9 Non-state actors including international civil society, associations, charities, non-governmental organizations, community groups, faith-based organizations, trade guides, unions, professional associations, and advocacy groups shall provide emergency services in social, economic, and security areas. March 3, 10. International and regional actors should use their diplomatic platforms to press Rwanda to comply with international law. March 3, 11. The international community and regional actors shall assist in the negotiation and navigation of agreements, allocating resources, and guiding policy. This is done by providing the political and financial support necessary to facilitate a peaceful transition. In addition, we provide humanitarian assistance that promotes democratic governance. 29. March 3, 12. As opposed to cementing a dictatorship in Rwanda with their resources and voices, the international community agrees to support its disintegration. March 3, 13. Through its money and advocacy, the international community shall work to secure justice and protection for those under threat. This is especially for those whose loved ones and friends have been victims. March 3, 14. As a part of the international community's bilateral engagement, its friendship and resources shall be used in documenting public social, political, and economic inequality in Rwanda. These inequality needs immediate attention. 4. The Transitional Council 1. The Transitional Council shall have a mandate to review all existing official and non-official restrictions that curtail the citizens' ability to actively participate in national political, social, and economic progress and design a framework for abolishing them and implement it with the assistance of the international community. 2. The Transitional Council is comprised of 12 categories of 66 individuals shall be organized as under these representation. 1. 10 individuals selected from the general public. 2. 6 individuals representing tribes. 3. 2 individuals representing survivors of genocide. 4. 2 individuals representing perpetrators of genocide. 5. 6 individuals representing Rwandan government/RPF regime. 6. 12 individuals representing opposition groups. 7. 8. Individuals representing activists. 8. 6 individuals representing civil society groups. 9. 4 individuals representing the gender classes. 10. 2 individuals representing the youth. 11. 2 individuals representing adults. 12. 6 individuals representing professionals. 3. The Transitional Council shall have a mandate of 24 months from the date of approval and signing of this agreement. 4. The Transitional Council shall be coordinated by a transitional committee comprised of 10 elected officials and technically assisted by 10 experts representing the international community. These 20 officials are tasked with giving feedback on assessments, supporting planning and coordination. They include a chairperson, vice chairperson, secretary general, deputy secretary general, general treasurer. 30. Deputy general treasurer, principal planner, deputy principal planner, diplomacy and public relations, deputy diplomacy and public relations. 5. A transitional council shall deliver a transitional framework for new local government structures, transitional/interim governments, policy guides, and other necessary tools. The transitional framework will outline the powers and functions of the Transitional Council, the Executive Committee, and the exit plan from transitioning to democracy. 6. The Transitional Council shall gather the tools and resources needed for preparing for the transition process. 7. To coordinate and manage the Transitional Council's mandate, an executive committee will be elected. 8. During the reform process, the Transitional Council will deliver the objectives of the policy guide called Syllabus for Better Life in Rwanda. This will serve as a roadmap for addressing political, social, and economic issues. 9. The Transitional Council shall publish civic education materials and disseminate them to reorder the public and prepare for local council elections. 10. As a result of the collaboration between the Transitional Council and international community, power will be gained back from the few who seized it in 1994, and the rightful owners, the people, will be able to claim it back. 11. The Transitional Council in collaboration with international partners shall organize and oversee the election of the transitional local councils to establish rule by the people. 12. The Transitional Council with the local councils and international community shall run an emergency social program for liberating people from extreme poverty and social disadvantages. 13. A National Electoral Commission will be created by the Transitional Council in collaboration with elected local councils. 14. It is the Transitional Council's responsibility to spearhead a free and fair national general election to begin the process of democratizing Rwanda. 15. The transitional government, local councils, and transitional partners shall plan and determine who is included in an inclusive transitional government. 16. A transitional council shall facilitate a peaceful transfer of power between the transitional/interim government and the democratically elected government. 31. 17. Transitional Council for establishing an exit strategy from transition/interim government to democratically elected government. 18. The Transition Council has to hand over its transitional powers and responsibilities to the National Council to continue the democratic legacy in Rwanda. 19. Termination of the Transition Council's mandate and activities. Chapter 4. Article 6, Implementation/Starting Point. 1. Transitional Framework 1.1. The Transitional Framework will address both short-term and long-term issues facing Rwanda, including reforming current institution, transitional institution, democratic institution, local institution structure, National Council, NACO, people structures. NACO, elected delegates from all provinces. For checks and balances, bills and projects, the governor appointed by RPF. Provincial councils, PCs, people structures. PCs, elected delegates from all districts. DC, RPF structure, serves RPF interest. District councils, DCs, people structures. DCs, elected delegates from all sectors. SC, RPF structure, serves RPF interest. Sector council, SCs, people structures. SCs, elected delegates from all cells. CC, RPF structure, serves RPF interest. Cells council, CCs, people structures, CCs, new structure. 32. The villages, RPF structure, serves RPF interest. Village Council, VCs, people's structures. VCs, elected delegates from all residents. Government dominated by a strong presidency. Totalitarian since 1994. Inclusive transitional/interim government democratically elected institutions. Executive President absolute power rules by consensus people's power. Parliament legislating for RPF reform to legislate public bills represents the people justice tool for beating the public reform to deliver justice promote and protect people's rights security sector the police force for the regime, guards the regime against the people. Reform to people's police to protect the public. Maintain law and order in the country. Armed forces, the president's mercenary for protecting the regime and be sold in mercenary contracts. Reform to national armed forces to protect people and country. Armed force for national defense, peacekeeping and humanitarian missions. Intelligence services, intimidation and terror/organized violence. Reformed into services for deterring threats on national security. Service for national protective measures. Socioeconomic despotism, state control, reform redistributive mechanism. Decision power owned by the public/stakeholders. 33. Land, property, and environment punitive laws and property seizure reform to restorative justice due process. Nationality according to President's interest. Reform procedure of acquiring nationality according to the law human rights and equality multiple human rights issues reform human rights mechanisms and educate the public. An environment that respects human rights and fundamental freedoms media and communication tight control of the media environment reform and educate the public about their rights to independent media. Democratic media governance is characterized by freedom of opinion and expression. 2. Approving the Framework 2.1. NACO, through public referendums, reviews and amends the Transitional Council's frameworks and bills before approval by the interim government. 3. The Rwanda Comprehensive Dialogue 3.1. The Rwanda Comprehensive Dialogue shall be a large gathering that brings together representatives of the public, stakeholders, interest groups, Rwandan government delegates and representatives of the international community. This gathering shall be used in the deliberations for shaping the peaceful transition process. 3.2.it is the responsibility of the Rwanda Comprehensive Dialogue to approve the initial proposals for the transition process. 3.3. Participants in Rwanda's Comprehensive Dialogue shall sign an agreement of partnership and support for the transition process. 3.4. The Rwanda Comprehensive Dialogue shall be presented with a proposed mandate for the Transitional Council to collectively improve and then approve it as a roadmap for Rwanda's future. 34. 3.5. The Rwanda Comprehensive Dialogue shall elect and establish a Transitional Council to be responsible for all planning, engagements, and coordination of all transition activities. 3.6. The Rwanda Comprehensive Plan will be presented with a proposed framework containing bills and policies on key national issues. This framework will be improved and approved before being handed over to the elected Transitional Council. 3.7. The Rwanda Comprehensive Dialogue shall propose, evaluate, and adopt a safe ideology upon which all national civic education and policies are centered. 3.8. As part of the Rwanda Comprehensive Dialogue, a new local government structure, the council system, will be reviewed and adjusted where necessary before adoption, and the Transitional Council will be authorized to implement it. 3.9. The Rwanda Comprehensive Dialogue shall deliberate on social and economic issues that warrant emergency intervention and declare areas of emergency. It shall then make recommendations on how they can be addressed. 3.10. the Rwanda Comprehensive Dialogue shall review the operating rules and regulations and adopt it guide the Transitional Council's work. 4. Electing the Transitional Council. 4.1. From all official delegates, Rwanda's Comprehensive Dialogue will elect the Transitional Council. 5. Mandate of the Transitional Council. 5.1. The transitional mandate shall be drafted by NPC and approved in the Rwanda Comprehensive Dialogue. This will also officially assign it to the elected Transitional Council. 5.2. The Transitional Council shall elect an executive committee to coordinate and manage all its activities in accordance with established internal rules and regulations. 5.3. The Transitional Council shall establish its operating rules to guide its activities and be respected by all its members. 5.4. The Transitional Council shall examine the Constitution and other laws and call for a national referendum to propose a review. When the review is approved, draft the bills to be considered. 35. 6. Planning and coordinating activities. 6.1. The Transitional Council, coordinated and managed by its executive committee, shall carry out all the planning and implementation. It shall report its work to the public using all media available. 6.2. The Transitional Council shall draft and table the transitional government mandate and receive it to be revised and confirmed in NACO. It shall then hand it over to the government for implementation. 7. The Executive Committee. 7.1. The Executive Committee is elected by and from members of the Transitional Council, and its primary role will be to provide overall political direction and to take the necessary decisions to ensure a coherent and coordinated approach is taken by the Transitional Council. 8. Information sharing/dissemination of results. 8.1. All parties must exchange information freely, promptly, and efficiently in accordance with the transition principles. 8.2. Written and recorded information will be shared between partners through information sharing processes. Sent by courier, electronically, in paper records, or verbally between partners. 8.3. The parties to this agreement agree that information sharing will be critical to developing a shared understanding of issues. This will enable them to arrive at a shared solution during the transition process. 8.4. In order to practice evidence-based, targeted interventions and evaluate their effectiveness, partners need to have the right information. 8.5. It is agreed that all information shared shall be relevant, robust, and current information from a wide variety of sources. This will help each other solve problems and improve results. 8.6. Parties to this agreement acknowledge that information sharing between relevant partners is essential. It forms the basis of this partnership, where it is used to tackle many obstacles that may arise from time to time. 36. 8.7. During this agreement, each party will specify an official who will act as the first point of contact. This will ensure the integrity of the information and the safety of all parties involved. 8.8. Dissemination of results. The Transition Committee is responsible for planning, publishing, and disseminating information and results by utilizing various methods, such as newsletters, booklets, workshops, and public meetings, online and mobile communication in order to inform, educate, and involve the public. 9. Creation approving transitional framework. 9.1. All creative work involving the drafting of frameworks, plans, and bills shall be done by the Transitional Council through its Executive Committee. NACO reviews, amends, and approves the proposed drafts. 10. Producing the Policy Guide. 10.1. A policy guidebook known as the Syllabus for Better Life in Rwanda contains all Rwanda's key issues and proposed solutions for each. NPC drafts guidelines to guide the planning of frameworks, programs, and bills. 10.2. This book shall be reviewed, amended, and approved by Rwanda's Comprehensive Dialogue. The dialogue shall then commit it to the Transitional Council as its transitional mandate. 11. Reforming local structures. 11.1. Reforming structures includes reviewing current laws, reforming social groups, gender grouping, state organization, governance and power structure, human rights and equality, justice sector, socio-economic reconstruction, land, property and environment, security sector. 12. Implementing emergency social programs. 12.1. In order to gain a sense of security in making the right decisions, Rwandans need rehabilitation to restore their self-esteem and confidence. This necessitates the creation of emergency social programs to meet both physical and spiritual needs to achieve the desired end. 12.2. The Transitional Council, along with the newly created local council system, will implement emergency programs within communities countrywide to reach and impact all target groups. 37. 13. Creation of Transformation Bills 13.1. During the transitional period, amendments and revisions to the Constitution and other laws will be proposed, and the Transitional Council will create and table bills to make those amendments. These amendments must be reviewed and approved by NACO before they can be enacted by the transition/interim government. Chapter 5. Article 7. Governance. 1. The transitional/interim government 1.1. According to the transitional guideline or framework, a new temporary political institution will be constituted that includes representatives of the public, opposition organizations, and other groups. 1.2. During the reforming process, a transitional/interim government will be formed that includes representatives of the public, interest groups, and stakeholders. 1.3. As soon as all national institutions have been successfully reformed and the transition/interim government has ended, general and presidential elections will be held. 2. Power sharing 2.1. As part of the transition process, power sharing shall be outlined in the transitional framework. A transition/interim government shall be formed that is comprehensive and includes all representatives confirmed by the Transitional Council. In contrast, power sharing after democratic elections will be established in the Constitution. 3. Turning bills into laws 3.1. As part of its mandate, the transition/interim government shall review and approve the drafts of bills drafted by the Transitional Council. It shall turn them into laws. 4. Prepare citizens for elections. 4.1. Since Rwanda has never practiced democracy, dangerous ethnic ideologies are still rampant in remnants of the genocide generation. The extreme repression of 38. The current regime has weakened the social fabrics and people's potentials in many ways. It is imperative that they are prepared mentally, socially, politically, and physically to play their expected part in the transition process. 5. Forming an electoral commission 5.1. The Transitional Council shall form an electoral commission. The Electoral Commission shall organize and oversee all electoral processes in the country as provided for in the transitional framework. This shall be approved by all parties to this agreement. 6. General Elections 6.1. Nearing the end of the transitional mandate, Rwanda will have general and presidential elections to be observed by international actors jointly with NACO. 7. The new democratically elected government 7.1. The democratically elected government's supreme power shall become a legitimate institution after taking the oath of office. Its power shall be vested in the people who elected it. It shall replace the transition/interim government and carry out the national mandate as provided for in the policy guide. 8. Abolish the mandate of the Transition Council. 8.1. As soon as the exchange of power between the democratically elected government and the transition/interim government, the mandate of the Transitional Council shall be accomplished, in which all its powers and unfinished business shall be transferred into the office of NACO, which is responsible for balancing power between institutions and overseeing the national priorities. Chapter 6. Article 8, Enforcement Mechanism 1. The security during the transition process, mobility/access 1.1. The enforcement of this agreement starts with NPC submitting it or distributing copies to the parties involved. It waits for other parties' decision, which upon receipt shall not take less than 30 days and not more than 90 days to respond. After 90 days pass without a response, a follow-up or a reminder shall be sent. 39. Once again to wait for a period of 30 days. If it still receives no response, other appropriate measures shall be taken. 1.2. The enforcement of this agreement is intended to bring a peaceful and positive political transition in Rwanda. Therefore, President Paul Kagame shall not pass presidential power to any member of his family, security forces, or his party members and be considered a peaceful transition. If President Paul Kagame attempts this direction, it shall be treated as denying Rwanda's rights to self-determination. It shall be contested using appropriate channels. 1.3. That once the agreement has been accepted as suitable and attainable by two of the parties, the funding party shall be presented with the budget and a plan of action by NPC for the preliminary work stated in Chapter 3 Article 5, Par 3.2, and after the funding has been released, NPC shall proceed with implementation of actions as agreed. 1.4. Once one or two parties start discussing how to implement the agreement, it shall be considered accepted. 1.5. The international community in Rwanda's government shall fund the process of enforcing this peaceful transition from preparation, execution to its conclusion. NPC performs technical work and engages with all parties involved. 1.6. The government of Rwanda shall be considered to be enforcing this agreement when it takes the steps stated in Chapter 3 Article 5, Par 3.1, and it will be considered to have rejected or ignored this agreement when it decides to mute or take no action after this agreement is received. 1.7. When Rwanda refuses to work with other partners under this agreement, the international community shall help NPC deliver its objectives. 1.8. In case the proposed agreement is ignored by the Rwandan government and refuses to open the political space, NPC shall be supported by the international community to build capacity and to begin the process outside Rwanda. 1.9. Once NPC has initiated the alternative process of bringing change from outside Rwanda, because this agreement has been rejected by the Rwanda government, there shall be no turning back. 1.10. The parties to this agreement shall follow the principle of open transparency in all their dealings in order to ensure that everyone is involved in its development process. If two of the parties to this agreement agree to any solution outside this agreement, it shall not apply or invalidate what has been agreed herein. This is 40. Until all parties have openly engaged in open talks that approve and seals the updated arrangements. 1.11. This agreement prevents any party from causing intentional or unintentional risks to each other. Doing so would be treated as committing a crime under the international framework and prosecuted by the international community using its instruments. 1.12. The international community and Rwanda's development/bilateral partners shall guarantee an independent neutral security and safe zone for activities of the Transitional Council and Executive Committee, communication, and transport throughout the reform and transitional process to enable the reform work to progress uninterrupted. 2. The security institution after the transition. 2.1. Newly reformed Rwandan security forces and police shall take over from the old guard and guarantee national security. This will enable the newly established institution to function. 3. National Council, NACO, 6.1. The National Council is a body of delegates sent by provincial councils to represent people, stakeholders, and interest groups. It also includes security councils, profession councils, representatives of civil society in non-profit organizations, NGOs. 6.2. NACO shall have the power to represent and prioritize the interests of the people in both the government and local systems, supervise the government, vet candidates for taking over any official position before confirming them, and stabilize the relationship between the peoples, between institutions and government, and between the donors and their funded projects. 7. International Community 7.1. Unless another agreement is made during or after the transition process to suggest the role or partnership between Rwanda and the international community, the international community's role shall continue to be that which is based on bilateral agreements and shall be represented in Rwanda as per the provisions of bilateral arrangements between both parties. 41. Chapter 7. Article 9, Start and Duration 1. This agreement becomes effective when all parties or two of the parties to this agreement agree to engage in the process proposed herein. It shall have a lifespan of 24 months. Article 10, Misunderstandings and their management 1. In the event any disagreement or dispute erupts between two of the parties to this agreement, the third party shall act as a mediator in resolving these disputes, and if the disputes cannot be solved by the parties to this agreement or when all the parties are disputing between them, an independent mediator shall be invited to help in resolving the dispute. 2. A disagreement or dispute that cannot be resolved by the parties or by the mediator shall become a legal matter solvable through international law. Chapter 8. Article 10, Declaration and Signature 1. The parties declare. All parties to this agreement declare that they intend to execute this peaceful transition agreement in Rwanda outlined herein. They agree to its terms and conditions, as well as logistical requirements. 2. Signatories 1.1. The Government of Rwanda of the Republic of Rwanda, for and on behalf of RPF Party, President Paul Kagame. Date, // 42. 7.2. National People's Concern, NPC, for and on behalf of Rwanda people, democratic groups and activists, Richard Ringwianiza Kayumba. Date, 20/04/.2023. 7.3. International Community /Rwanda's Development Partners 7.3.1. The United Nations, date / 7.3.2. European Union. Date / 7.3.3. The United States of America, date / 7.3.4. The United Kingdom, UK, date / 7.3.5. The Federal Republic of Germany, date / 7.3.6. The Republic of France, date / 7.3.7. The Kingdom of Belgium, date / 7.3.8. The Kingdom of the Netherlands, date / 7.3.9. The Swiss Confederation, date / July 3, 10. The Kingdom of Sweden, date / July 3, 11. Japan, date / July 3, 12. The People's Republic of China, date / 43. July 3, 13, the Republic of South Korea, date / July 3, 14. The Republic of India, date / July 3, 15. The World Bank, date / July 3, 16. Global Fund, date / July 3, 17. Africa Development Bank, date / July 3, 18. International Monetary Fund, date / July 3, 19. Arab Bank for Economic Development in Africa, date / July 3, 20. Africa Union date / July 3, 21. East African Community, date /